Good evening and welcome back to another edition of Beyond the Backstage Pass. I am your host, Vince Edwards. You may know me from Sound Image Productions. I also have a couple roadie groups, closed groups on Facebook called Beyond the Backstage Pass and Death by Loadout. Come check us out. To my right is my good friend and co-host, Kyle Thomas. Kyle Thomas, how are you today, sir?
I am doing especially well today, brother.
We have a very special show today.
Well, let me tell you, my morning started out with doing a gig, so that was the highlight of my moment right now. It's like, holy shit.
You were like plugging stuff in.
Setting up redundant rigs. Oh my
goodness.
I was around other people other than you. Oh my God.
Major improvement. just that little part made everything better.
I was super happy to be out doing something at least.
Seriously. Absolutely. You were playing around. I think we took out one of Diablo Digital's Pro Tool rigs. Recording rigs.
We had two rigs, SXL, nice little monitor package. It was with Matt Gill in the Tune Yards.
Very sweet.
Matt did a very good job, man.
Very cool. Are you on the Restore tomorrow? This is a business question, but I'm curious.
No, that's all you.
Yeah, so I'll see you tomorrow.
All right. Hey, so we got something going on. I know we've been talking about the tech corner and stuff, but now we're approaching maybe filming some mix-offs with potentially Brad and Greg being our first clients or guests.
Guinea pigs, really.
Guinea pigs.
Can you imagine the fur
I'm trying
flying
to stay
in
away
that
from
event?
guinea pig.
Oh my God.
We want to know the ideas of people watching, whether we do, what consoles you want to see, and whether we do SXL versus the Digico or Avid versus Avid or something like that.
SSL versus Yamaha.
Sure, anything.
Yeah.
So if you guys, we're gonna post, we're gonna get up on a community poll on our YouTube this week at some point, and if you guys can chime in, just fill out the poll and contribute what you guys want to see.
If I heard you correctly, I think you just said we're polling about a poll.
We're polling about a poll.
All
Yep,
right.
That's what we're doing.
All right.
You got to bring awareness to the polls, man.
I feel like there's a lot of awareness on the poll already. Another subject.
Hey, and
what else you got?
we also got these lovely sweet strings.
You're all up on these right now.
Man, let me tell you, they sound really good on my guitar. So
Whoa.
I think Sam Hurley did a really good job designing these. And
Show the camera.
yeah, I think Mikey's got a picture this time.
You got a picture, Mikey?
You don't have to zoom in.
Boom. Look at that.
They're pretty sharp. They're cryogenically treated, so they stay in tune a bit longer.
A little more resistant to breaking.
Yep, a little bit more resistant to breaking. We also got a discount code, 10% off, posted up on our, I think it's posted directly on the YouTube chat, so feel free.
Well, if we don't yet, we will soon. Keep a lookout for them. Again, we don't talk about anything we don't believe in, and I got, 6 guitars in here in the shop. I think 5 or 6. I know we strung up one of them, and it sounded great, and very functional, very utilitarian. And our friend came up with these, and so we support it.
Yeah, there you go. The promo code's Backstage. So if you go to their site, just put in Backstage, bring you right to it, give you 10% off.
Well, that seems eminently fair for a very quality piece of equipment. That's very nice.
Definitely, brother.
Yeah, baby. So me, you, tomorrow, rock and roll, Restore show.
I guess I don't see any way out of it.
Yeah.
You better bring dog biscuits.
I'm going to bring you a whole box this time. Not just this single Scooby snack here or there. I'm going to bring you a whole damn,
all right,
just a crate of dog biscuits.
I'm leaving if I don't get it.
I've said it before. You function best when you have been motivated by food.
This is true.
Yes.
I'm a skinny dude. You have to feed my tapeworm for me to be happy.
Well, you remember we got the locker units over here.
Yeah.
And a couple years back, we would have some of the younger guys that would start fading out around 2 o'clock, and it was low blood sugar. So I just started packing them full of candy. And so they would eat this crap all day and be buzzing around like little bees. I highly suggest it to anybody who's running crews. You want to keep them up, keep them fed.
There you go.
Particularly of high sugar content garbage. And they have a wicked come down after work, but on work, they're super efficient. It's a good trick.
You want to work for Vinny, you're getting fed candy. That's candy and nachos.
Yeah. I've had few complaints, I tell you. Right on, my brother. Thank you for all you did this week, and I'm stoked we got some work. That's a super good thing, but we have ourselves a very special guest. You want to get to it?
I don't see any way out of it.
Yeah, no, listen. Guys, thanks for tuning in this evening. We really appreciate it. We are lucky enough to have some good friends in the game. and not all of them are created equal. Tonight is a massive example of that. We have a gentleman who's an award-winning front of house engineer, from everybody from Warrant to Jay-Z to, I mean, the list is so long. What the hell's the gal's name? Amazing. Whitney Houston.
Whitney Houston.
Yeah, Whitney Houston. And of course, currently one of my favorite bands in the world. I'm so envious that you have this job. Is with the incredible Iron Maiden. It is it is also the co-host on the Wrong End of the Snake. Friggin' great podcast. Check that sucker out. And he does a thing with it's called Pooch and Rybold. Also incredibly good. You gotta check it out. It is our dear friend Ken Pooch Van Druten. How you doing, my brother?
Hey, I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me on.
It is so good to see you. You look great, bright-eyed, bushy tail. Everything good in your life?
It's a little bit past my bedtime here in Dallas. We're talking it's 9 o'clock. This should be when I should be going to bed. I'm old, you know.
I will send you some coffee or something in the mail for staying up this late with us, my brother. We very much appreciate it. Seriously.
No, of course. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
You bet, buddy. Let me ask you. So here in the show, we're a talk show kind of format, what we go for, and everybody's always, especially a person as accomplished as you are in the game, is they like the origin story. So tell us about how you got in the business.
I mean, it goes all the way back until when I was 3 years old. I started playing classical piano. Literally, like, my mother was a classical pianist, and she would place me in, the bassinet underneath the piano when she practiced. So I heard piano from when I was born, onwards. And so I studied classical piano from when I was 3 until about 12, and picked up all kinds of other instruments along the way. I actually was a flute player for 4 or 5 years and studied with the first chair of the San Francisco Symphony Orchestra.
Wow.
So that was exciting as a 10-year-old, 11-year-old.
Yeah. That's...
But then as I got into adolescence, I realized that neither one of those instruments were going to get me the girls. Right?
Yeah, that's correct.
So I, switched to playing. I was that guy like at school where, the music teacher would be like, oh, we need a drummer. Ken, can you play drums? And I would play drums. And so I ended up playing all kinds of instruments and going through all that. And eventually, I grew up around where you guys are. I grew up in Lafayette in the East Bay.
Right.
But I ended up in high school due to a bunch of circumstances, mostly that I was just a shit teenager. But I ended up at a boarding school that was a performance arts boarding school. And I really just, loved it. It was like, do you remember that old TV show Fame?
Oh, absolutely. New York.
Yeah, it was like that.
Yeah.
It was like there was, actors and singers and musicians and, and so it was just, something really amazing. And I thrived in it when I was in high school. And graduated from there and got a scholarship to Berklee College of Music. And went to Berklee for 4.5 years and got my degree there in music production and engineering. And I just fell in love with the whole studio thing. I had no intention of being a live sound guy. I started working in Boston at a studio there. I worked my way up from being a runner to their head engineer by the time I left. And made the big move to Los Angeles after college, and started working in studios in Los Angeles as a producer and recording engineer, and had a pretty successful go at it for about 3 or 4 years. And then, as you mentioned before, Warrant came to the studio, and I was actually doing demos for one of their records, and Janie Lane, the lead singer, said, "Hey, man, we fired our front of house guy. You want to come mix front of house?" And I said, "Well, I've never done that before." And literally, I had never mixed front of house at all. I didn't know anything about it. And I went, "Okay, cool." And the next night, I found myself mixing Warrant at the LA Forum opening for Rat.
So you didn't jump in small.
No.
You went to the LA Forum. I know the audience doesn't know. This is a classic venue. This is a must.
Yeah.
This is like Red Rocks, but in LA. Not for the style, but for energy. You know, that place's history is ridiculous. Great place to start, my brother.
It was exciting, and I caught the bug immediately, right? You know, I was thrown into a place with 12,000 people screaming for something that I was doing.
Well, that's right.
And the impact of that was hard on me. I was like, screw the studio, man. This is where it's at. You know?
I completely understand.
And kind of never looked back. Like the rest of my career was all mostly live stuff, although I do make some records here and there.
Well, you know, that feeling is very addictive that you speak of, and I think it's the many of us that have stayed in for the long term, and that's a big, huge part of the reason. So, yeah, I can totally get it.
Better than any drug.
It really is.
Still to this day, in my 50s, I get, the hairs on my arms stand up when it's an amazing moment and people are screaming for something that you're doing.
Yeah, it's absolutely priceless.
Yeah.
And I bet you get a lot of screams, mister.
Well, I do with Iron Maiden, man. They're an awesome band.
Well, and I'm going to do this interview kind of non-linearly, just to kind of mix it up a little bit.
Sure.
And so that's where I was going first, was to talk about your most current thing that you've done, which was touring with Iron Maiden. I know that they present. First of all, one of my favorite bands of all time. It's just
lifelong dream. I'm a complete fan. I grew up in my teenage years. I had Circus Magazine posters of Iron Maiden all over my walls. So
yeah, it was Steve Harris for me. You know, it is monster on the bass. You know, and just
me too. I'm a bass player too, and he's amazing.
Yeah. Now I know from having a few friends that have done the job before you, complained, loved the work, loved the band, loved the guys. Eddie and the whole deal, but would complain a lot about Steve in particular because his style of play is, his finger and he's a lot of fret noise. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so there's already 3 guitar players, and they all play Strats, and they all play through Marshalls. That frequency range, although they're playing different parts, it's the same frequency range, right? So finding placement for those 3 guitars is hard enough. And then the bass guitar is basically a 4th guitar. Yeah. It doesn't really make a whole lot of low end. Certainly no sub information, like a traditional R&B bass guitar that has 60 hertz in it and below.
Right.
There's none of that in his stuff.
No.
So I treat it like an instrument that needs help a little bit in that range. So there are some frequencies that are being boosted down in there just because if there wasn't any of that information, the mix would feel really bright and nasty. Yeah. So I am kind of manufacturing some things down there that aren't coming out of his rig. But they're just subtle. It's subtleness felt stuff. But honestly, his tone, I mean, you listen to Iron Maiden records and he's louder than the guitars in the records. And that's the way he should be.
Absolutely.
The bass is up front,
Well, a lot of times he's also going lick for lick with them, like you said. So he does this kind of almost like a rhythm guitar parts, but when it's time to kind of wander off into the licks, he's usually right there with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're an interesting band. They're like no other band. You can't mix them like a rock band.
Yeah.
There's a couple things going on. Nico is like pretty much a jazz drummer.
Yeah, that's correct.
He's got, all these toms and his licks are really nuanced, it's almost jazz like. And then you've got, like I said, the 3 guitars that all are similar tones. And then you've got Steve, who's supposed to be out front. His tone is unusual. It's not like any other bass player. And then, you've got Bruce, the singer, who's just, that dude is beneath Whitney Houston. He is the best singer I've worked with.
Well, it's funny. We were just talking about Bruce. I got Winston Dama in here, heavily accomplished A1. He's playing around on the SXL, and we were talking about Bruce's accomplishments. And, I mean, everything from he's a champion fencer, he's an accredited 757 pilot. I mean, he's kind of an author, an incredible vocalist, incredible frontman. He really understands how to operate a crowd, how to lift them up, put them down, move them. Yeah, that which is, an art in its own right. A very special cat. What's it like being on Ed Force One? For people who haven't been on Ed Force One and see how seriously Bruce Dickinson takes that job, can you tell us about Ed Force One?
I can't actually. I haven't been on it.
What?
Yeah. So the Souls tour, which was the tour before I started, was the last time that they had Ed Force One. So I joined them in 2017, I guess, for the Legacy of the Beast tour.
Wow, heavy. And you got mad love for Iron Maiden, one of the best international touring bands.
Yeah, and I just want to say one other thing about Bruce is like everyone feels like the dumb one in the room when he's in the room. You know what I mean? He's that guy that's super smart and loves talking about airplanes, but is a rock star. And like I said, his voice is unbelievable. Like what comes out of that dude's mouth is crazy.
Yeah, he's definitely one of the most proficient, accomplished singers in the game. I know he takes it very seriously, voice coach the whole bit, and it shows. His concerts is one of the few guys that you can show to show who just keeps killing it every time. Always brings a big show.
Man.
And I know you're a big part of that, and the sounds that we all hear out in the audience. It's critical stuff.
I mean, they give it to me. And I feel like. This band, I learned a long time ago that I can mix a band that I'm not a fan of and don't give a shit about. I can do that. I can mix that band. But when it's really great is when it's a band that you're a fan of and the nuances and you grew up listening to their music and that one little fill every dude in the room is going to be air drumming to,
right.
And it's got to be out front.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of things where it's like, man, this is a lot of fun. Sometimes I'm mixing and I feel it transports me right back to being 15 years old. Like I'm sitting there in a giant stadium with 80,000 people, but really I'm in my room when I was a teenager cranking Maiden on my record player. So it's amazing.
I bet you find moments where you kind of pinch yourself and make sure this is all happening because
real.
In our business, and a lot of the people in the audience will relate to this. We don't always get to work with the bands we love, and
that's right.
And so that you get to is a very a special thing.
I'm super blessed, dude. I'm super blessed.
Yeah.
Very, very, very lucky.
Well, you bring the talent, man, and so they're always looking for you. Talk to me about Kiss. I know you worked with Kiss and Doc McGee, and that I've done as well. And what was your experience with him? Did you enjoy that?
So I I did Kiss for the first farewell tour, which, by the way, was 20 years ago.
That's great. That's a business. It's a bar in its own right. The farewell tour is a business model that is actually we read about it in our trade mags. So,
but they keep doing it, which I think is hilarious. Like they keep saying it. But I did the original farewell tour that had the 4 original members, Ace, Paul, Gene, and Peter. And it was like 3 years of a tour. It was really long. It was all over the place. And I kind of, my end of Kiss was me mixing the Kiss live symphony orchestra in Melbourne, which was amazing. It was a 60-piece symphony orchestra along with Kiss. And there was all this, like boys choir for one section, and they played acoustic. And I mean, it was crazy. And you got to realize this is 20 years ago. So I was on 2 XL4s. And no digital console. So, it was 100 and some odd inputs.
Damn.
And there was a guy that was submixing the symphony,
of course,
and sending me stems of it. And it was crazy. And that was kind of one of the last shows that I did with them.
Well, with Gene, he's not going to ever put down the credit card machine if there's a way to make money. It's just how the man rolls, and is very successful as a result. But yeah, they're a lot of fun. At the same time, Doc can be a little bit of a handful, but also legendary manager. I don't think you have much time dealing with Doc.
Oh yeah, all the time. Yeah, I mean, basically, he there were moments with that band where it wasn't about quality; it was about just how loud I could get it.
Yeah, I know.
And at that point, we were using Shoko prison boxes and a shitload of them. And they were just on stun. I mean, that old Shoko drive was just squirting blood, the entire time. So there were moments where the finesse part of it was lost because Doc, about halfway through the show, his ears would close down a little bit, and then he'd get in my shit and go, turn it up, And so sometimes we would go to places that were like, oh man, I didn't want to go there, but I was young in the game, and I was like, okay, we're going there. The manager says do it, and I do it.
Yeah, and he doesn't fall for that, phantom button shit. He's too hip.
Nope.
Yeah, I know. If you've worked with Kiss, you've been poked in the back by Doc. That's as simple as that.
That's it.
That just
and he has always been good to me. He's a great, legendary manager. Everyone knows that.
Absolutely, he's one of a kind and very, very good at what he does.
And honestly, he took a chance on me. Toby Francis was actually the guy mixing, the reunion tour and then Psycho Circus. And then he didn't want to do the farewell tour, and he placed me there without even ever meeting me. I never met Toby, but Toby went to bat for me with Doc on ML Pro Size's Word. And also Robert Long, who's an amazing production manager in the business.
Yes.
Both of those guys went to bat for me because prior to that, I was mixing, well-known bands, but this was a big front of house move for me.
Absolutely.
And so, Doc took a chance on me, and I'm forever grateful.
Well, it sounds like, Francis and just putting your name up like that, it says that he must have seen you somewhere doing your work.
Well, what's weird about that is he didn't. Robert Long was my business partner back then, and he was the guitar tech for Paul. Mm-hmm. And so when Toby said, I'm going to leave, Robert went to bat for me with Toby and said, oh, man, I'm telling you, Pooch is great. You got to hire him. And then Toby, without even ever meeting me, actually, he did meet me, but he never heard me mix. So that says something about Toby, is that he's willing to help people even when he doesn't really know that they're going to succeed.
Yeah, that's very, very cool. I'm trying my best to get him on the show. Hopefully that will happen.
Great.
Yeah, a wonderful guy. Let me ask you the origins of the nickname Pooch.
Well,
come on.
Let's see. It comes from actually working for Vince Neil, of all bands. He would call me Big Dog, because of my size. And that kind of evolved into Pooch. And also there was a production manager there named Doc Williamson that kind of encouraged people to call me Pooch. And then right after that gig, I got Whitney Houston as her monitor engineer. And she just loved it. She loved the nickname Pooch. She would, Pooch, can you come over here and turn my monitors up? She loved that. And the name just stuck. And there was a minute there in the business where some people knew me as Ken and some people knew me as Pooch, and they couldn't put it together that it was the same person. So I just went, screw it, I'll go with Pooch. And it just has stuck ever since.
I got a picture. The name is now it's kind of like, Chevrolet in our game, at least. It really is Pooch. I made a meme of you where it had, I put up the memes on the Facebook,
yeah.
but I got a picture of you in a class where you're kind of giving this example. You know the meme I'm talking about.
I've seen it. It's great.
and everybody loves that one. I won't sometimes allude to who is in the picture, and that's almost invariably people always have to show they know who that you are by saying, oh, it's Pooch. It's Pooch.
Oh, yeah.
So it's really
so nice.
It's very sweet. Yeah. No,
it's nice that people like my work. That is, that there's nothing better than when people enjoy what we do, right? When someone comes up to me after a show at front of house and I'm packing up, rolling up cables, and they stand there at the barricade and just go, man, dude, it was awesome. That's why I do what I do.
Yeah. No, that's an incredible feeling. And some of the bands that like Kiss or Iron Maiden, these are bands that have diehard fans. So when we get it right, they're appreciative.
I used to have my head down at the console at a Kiss concert. They come by and go, "Sounds great," and I go, "Were we at the same show?"
Well, there's a difference. It's kind of the difference between the Jamiroquai crowd and the Motorhead crowd. The crowd just wants to have their face peeled back. And kind of a lot of omnidirectional kind of offset their heart a little bit. And so,
well, sound is like the 20th thing on the list with Kiss. It's about stuff blowing up and gags and lights and fireworks and all that shit. If all that's good, then somewhere in there, word sound is at the bottom of that. But it has to be loud as hell.
Right. Well,
but I'll tell you, they have changed. So Adam Stewart, who's mixing them now, is doing a fantastic job, and they're at a real level, and they sound great. And so it's great to see them embrace new technology and actually have come back to the sounding good plan.
Sounding good.
I mean, it was, listen, it was an exciting 3 years for me. And I did think that I made them sound good, but there were moments where I was, in the back lounge of a bus, just going, I can't make this band sound good. I can't do it,
Well, their special requirements make that harder to do. That's for sure.
Yep.
Yeah,
for sure.
Which is coming at you with a 112, SPL or whatever. What
Yeah.
How do they denote to you that that's what they're after? What's the words that they use to tell you this? Just
we want it loud as hell.
Heard them.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, like Doc, behind me going, "Turn it up,"
Yeah.
and back then, we weren't as concerned about hearing as we are now. And, we weren't doing measurement of SPL and that kind of shit. We were just pushing the system until it wouldn't go anymore,
Right. Gas all the way
so, I would guess that a lot of those shows were 105, 106, 107 A-weighted in front of house for sure.
Wow. Yeah. That's kind of old school rock and roll approach.
It is. Well, I mean, and it was Prism system, right? So, front loaded JBL speakers, there's something to be said about that. We've all transferred into line arrays now, but for a rock band like that, a front loaded JBL PA was pretty great.
Oh, very cool. Well, I can see yes, I get that. Let me ask you, I know you worked with Jay-Z. What's the challenges, if any, that go between mixing a rap show, and especially somebody like Jay-Z, who's kind of got a very unique vocal style? He tends to have a large posse with him. What's the difference between mixing a rap show like Jay-Z versus Kiss?
The great thing that's happening these days for me and some other rock mixers are that the rap genre is embracing rock mixers. So is pop. Pop is embracing rock mixers because they know that we're used to creating impact. And Jay-Z in particular, liked the fact that I mixed the live band over the top, just a little bit over the top of the playback. And he wanted that live feel. He wanted it to be a live type show, not just a standard rap show, with all playback stuff. And so I think he was specifically looking for that from me. And that's true. You talk to Toby about, Katy Perry and Ariana Grande and all that. They have hired him because he's a rock mixer and gets impact into a pop show. So I think it's great for some of us old guys that have traditionally been rock mixers. We're now able to transfer into what's hot right now,
Yeah, absolutely.
But Jay-Z's amazing. You have to know your genre, right? Like any time that I work for any band, I study and I learn and listen to records, and you learn by listening and saying, okay, well, it's all about the sub information. Like we got to move some air in this room.
Right.
And so it's just that it's study.
Yes, I totally agree. My friend Charlie Zericki, I'm not sure if he knows Zericki, he's old school.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, Charlie's a great guy. He's asking you, he's asking me to ask you, have you ever worked for Eminem?
Yes, actually I have, only as his monitor engineer, but yeah, I did probably, 2 months with him as the monitor engineer.
My brother just sent a hi to you as well.
Oh, awesome.
It's Jorge Eduardo here. It just sent you.
I love it.
Let me ask you about your podcast, Wrong End of the Snake. I've been following that for a while. That is a great podcast. How did that come? You do that with Tater, with Kevin. How did that come about?
Well, Tater and I are an old married couple at this point. We've literally been working with each other for 20 years. And doing, I think we've done, I actually haven't counted, but I think it's 10 to 12 really well-known huge bands we've done together. So we are at that point in our lives where we don't even really talk to each other on the gig. You know, we know exactly what the other guy is doing.
Sure.
And it's a really great symbiotic relationship. And so during this time, this COVID time, and we're stuck at home, I wanted to, keep in touch with Tater. He's a great friend of mine. And so we came up with this idea of having some guests on, and the whole thing is talking about relationships. It's about how people come up in this industry and how you got to where you are, et cetera, et cetera. And so we've been lucky enough to have some amazing guests on. We had Mike Shinoda, Derek Sherinian, we've had some really great guests. So we've been lucky.
Oh, I couldn't recommend the show enough. It's entertaining, informative. You guys have great chemistry together. Yeah, everybody should check it out. Wrong End of the Snake, pretty much anywhere you can find podcasts. Super good stuff. And how is Mr. McCarty? Is he okay?
He's doing great. He he keeps saying he's learning things about like what's happening at home that he never knew about. He drove up to his house the other day and noticed that his house, he's in Detroit, noticed that his house didn't have any snow on the roof and that the house next door had about 6 inches of snow. And he's driving up and he goes, "That means my insulation sucks."
Or he's Mama's keeping it super hot in the house.
Exactly. So
one way or another, he's losing money.
Exactly. Yeah. So he's learning all kinds of things that he didn't know about have been happening at home for the last 30 years.
That's absolutely hilarious.
Me too.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I'm surprised our women haven't, kicked us out by now. They're still not used to having us around. It's
oh my goodness. My wife and I had a serious had to redo our whole relationship because that's not how we've been. We've been together for 23 years and I'd be gone for 10 months out of the year, and really only be home for about 2 months total. So this last year has been a lot of, working through a bunch of shit.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, it's a strange time for us. We've been running and gunning for so long, and to be able to kind of slow down, it's messed with all these areas of my life that I'm trying to get used to it. And I feel like we're about to gear back up. But we got that plan with the.
It's coming.
Yeah. So we're gonna pull. I think starting next week, we're gonna light the shop back up and kind of run through its paces, get everything on board and online, and hopefully hit the ground running.
Yeah.
You mentioned Mike a minute ago from Linkin Park, and I know that was a band you spent some time with. We know of the relatively recent tragedy. Brad was out with them. Brad Maddox was out with them when one of our guys here, and that was rough. But what was your experience like with Linkin Park?
Amazing. I worked for them for 13 years, and they're great to me. It was the perfect experience of acting as a front of house guy, but also as a producer of the live show. So I had lots of interaction between all the band members. In fact, before every show, I would go to the dressing room when we would have conversations about the show before, and say, "Oh, that one little section doesn't really work. We need to tweak that a little bit." And so it was a really great place to be creative, as well as be a sound guy. So all those guys that I worked with and stuck around there for 13 years, and they're all family. And, I ended up leaving like 6 months before Chester died, and Brad took over after me and did an excellent job.
Yeah, I remember he walked in the shop that day. He,
Yeah.
was supposed to go on to another show, and then, of course, Dexter passed, and he came in and he kind of walked past my office, and I said, "Well, what the hell are you doing here?" And Brad Maddox, Brad, he's not a man that shows a lot of emotion, and he didn't that day, but he showed more than I'd ever seen out of him, and yeah, it was hard. That was a tough one.
It was crushing, man. Chester was. Of all the band members, Mike Shinoda, I had a really good relationship too. But Chester and I shared all kinds of things. Both of us got sober a bunch of years ago, so we were, we had this kind of kinship of in sobriety, and so he was a great dude, and it was a terrible, terrible loss.
Yeah,
it was awful.
Huge loss for the business, huge loss for his friends and family, and I think those rough moments. That's why we try to support some kind of ongoing stuff with Paige, my brother, has with Loving Hands for Stagehands.
Yes,
it's a real thing. Men get in my opinion, get a lot of their sense of purpose from what they do in life and the contributions they make. And sometimes you can get in a down spot and, to take in a permanent solution to a temporary problem. It's a real thing. So
it is, man. And especially during these times, I've often thought about this, the financial insecurity is hard.
Yeah.
But the real deal for me is the not having an outlet for my creativity. Like that, my whole life is focused as being a sound guy for a band and being able to be creative and, like a painter, paint every day,
Yeah.
And so you take that away from me and you don't let me have it for a year. And that is, man, you can really go into some bad places, so this time, I urge anybody that's out there and having a rough time, man, permanent solutions are not the way.
No, reach out to your friends. We're out here at any time, a phone call away. I like to think we're kind of a brother or sisterhood in what we do.
Yes.
I always see the rest of the world as kind of civilians to what we do, and we need to be there for each other. So we try our best with our little pages, and every so often, if you haven't talked to a friend in a while, you might want to reach out. These are critical things in this time. It's been
that's what I'd say to people is just call people that might be struggling. Just give them a call and say hi.
Yeah, it could be literally be enough to make a difference.
That's right.
And whatever it takes is critically important, because I think people get caught in these moments that their process isn't realizing shortly that will be over and you'll be on to the next thing, and you can get caught in a bad moment. And in our business, we've seen this way too many times, between Cornell and Stanley and all the different, Wheeling. It's really tragic and traumatic, when it's happening.
God.
So
I had just worked for Cornell right before he killed himself, and then I worked for Linkin Park. So I've had my fair share of rock stars die on me. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, it's super unfortunate. Let's talk about let's change lane. It's the same lane, but let's talk about a slightly different genre. You mixed Justin Bieber at his height. What was that like? Screaming Girls is like doing a Beatles concert in Jay Stadium, I imagine.
Oh my God. Dude, the shit that comes out of a 15-year-old's mouth is unbelievable. And you put 80,000 of them together, and
oh man.
There would be times where literally I would mix, and in between songs I'd have to put my fingers in my ears and wait for them to come back down after the 112,
Yeah.
But yeah, no, crazy. It was interesting. It was the first time that I'd ever worked with a band or an artist where, as a front of house guy, I didn't have access to the star.
Weird.
So there was no communication between me and the star. So it was all of a sudden it was me trying to figure out who's got his ear and also who's important, right?
Sure.
And so then it's a mixture of like 6 people that I have to decide who are important and what I should be listening to in order to achieve the best result. So it was a really interesting political situation. But it was rewarding, and it was, we're playing huge stadiums all over the world, and I enjoyed it. His band is really great. So yeah, I mean, it was an interesting time.
Well, you get gigs like that. We Backstreet Boys had the same exact kind of thing. You'd try to go through their different handlers and figure out who's the guy that's blowing and who's here, because the handlers. It always seemed to me the handlers don't want to lose their. The justification for their existence.
Oh, they don't want to lose their jobs.
Yeah, that's right. And so somehow or another they become this, this weak ass and go between. It can be very stifling in the creative area, but going out with a band like Bieber's band, I have to imagine is a bunch of just hired guns and straight up badasses studio guys.
They are, and they're young kids though too. They aren't so young now, but they were at the time. They were a group of kids that came out of the Atlanta church scene, believe it or not.
Wow.
But just hotshot kids that had great talent. And there was an MD that had been there on the tour before the one that I did. And so he kind of put the band together. So they were, young, eager, great chops. And it was great.
Yeah, very cool. You mentioned that, with Bieber and Maiden and all the bands that you've toured with, the stadiums, touring around the world, any downsides, in your opinion, to international touring?
The travel?
see, I always liked the travel. It was always customs for me. Is the bullshit that happens at the borders. Other than that, I always enjoyed, the architecture and the food and the culture.
I do too. I got to tell you though, it's getting harder and harder to fly 24 hours to South Africa. You know what I mean? It's like,
you can imagine.
God. And I had real eagerness as a young kid in my 20s and my 30s to spend off days exploring cities. And so now I'm going back to those same cities for the, 6th, 7th, 8th time. And so, I'll go to a spot that I know and have dinner and that's about it. I'm not as enthusiastic about it, but, no, man, I enjoy it. I enjoy seeing different cultures and seeing, 80%, 90% of the people in the U.S. don't go outside of the U.S. We're very lucky. We get to see some interesting things.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you got a guy like Gregory Price still out there murdering it, he should be out with Disturbed right now if it wasn't for this thing. At 70, still killing it and still relevant. He's making it hard for us where we can't come off. Because,
for real.
He just keeps moving that bar up and the time we're going to be on the job longer, because you ain't wrong. The traveling is not for the faint of heart, or it's a little more built for the younger man, I think. But
I think so. But I still enjoy it. There's no question. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it. But it has gotten harder. But yeah, Greg's amazing. Greg Price has been a big mentor to me. I was always the kid that was mixing the band before Ozzy on Ozfest. I did I don't know how many, 4 or 5 of those things. And he was always like super helpful. There was even a year I was mixing System of a Down where Ozzy was playing in the parking lot. He was playing on a B stage in the afternoon, and System of a Down was closing Ozfest.
That's nuts.
Which was really weird. But Greg's, amazing and has always been really great to me.
He is one of the few. Well, I find this is more and more is the old pros are a little more willing to share, their tips and tricks, because in the, the 80s and that was less of a thing. People were kind of, real precious about their special sauce. They were sure in the outboard gear, they'd set everything back to factory, before they'd walk away from it. And so when, and Greg and Brad to a certain extent, we go to them all the time when we need to get bailed out on something, or, an insightful little tip. It's an incredible resource. What led to you starting up the Pooch Rabel broadcast? That extremely exciting. I watched the episode with you talking about the Earthworks mics that you guys had gotten. That was right. So great. The way you guys kind of dealt with the topic of being branded by an individual mic, which in your position is really hard to accept. You got your favorites that do specific things, and
that's right.
It doesn't always lend it to saying I'm the Earthworks engineer guy, all Earthworks. It doesn't really work. But how did you guys come together?
So that kind of evolved from he and I just being friends, and much like Brad and Greg, we don't have a business together, Raybold and I, but but we were those guys that were talking to each other on the regular, like 2 or 3 times a week, talking about gear and stuff and being like, hey, what are you using now? What have you heard? Whatever, kvetching about the jobs that we have. And I thought in the beginning of this COVID thing, we had one of those phone calls, and I said to Chris, I said, dude, wouldn't it be awesome if everyone could hear what we're talking about? Just because, we just talk about stupid shit. And so it turned into something that's really great. And I think, it's us passing along as much knowledge as we can. I believe that it is my place to pass on what I've learned. I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I learned everything that I do by watching somebody else. So now it's my turn to give back.
Yeah, it's funny. Robert Wilcox, he's Motley Crue's guy. Badass, true badass.
He's great.
Just reached out, and he said that. What can you help me with that, big boy? Kyle,
what's that mean?
What was can you push back the comments that Robert just mentioned something? He said, Greg and Dave Morgan convinced me that I could go back out again.
Yeah, we had David Morgan on the other day, and he's 71. And we were talking to him, and we're like, dude, are you ever going to stop? When are you going to retire? And he's like, I don't know. I'm going to keep going as long as I like doing it. So,
he's not wrong. I don't know if you ever noticed the common denominator is when a man retires, that can start to be kind of the beginning of the end. Again,
totally.
We kind of derive a lot of our purpose and I think forward momentum from, our sense of satisfaction we acquire from the work we do. So, Robert, you stick to your guns, fella, and you got a Motley Crue tour you owe us. So
that's right.
So you're not getting out of that, buddy. We want to see some Motley Crue and some Def Leppard out here as soon as that's feasible.
For real.
Right on. Mixing with her Kid Rock. I was talking to somebody about it, and they were telling me about going to a show where you were mixing for Kid Rock, and I think they, delicately put, said it was quite an experience. How was that for you?
Quite an experience. I have no idea. That was before I got sober.
The before and after photo on that, boy. I can imagine.
My God, those were some blurring years. I went from like mixing monitors for Pantera to mixing Kid Rock, front of house for Kid Rock, and it was just out of hand. When the boss is doing all of it, then everybody else is too. So
that's right.
It was. There are definitely moments that I have 6 months of time I don't remember really. But it was an interesting experience. We called it the matinee show because he would do sound checks for sometimes up to 3 hours. So we would start sound checks at 2.
Damn.
Him work with the band on specific parts of songs for 3 hours. And then we'd get an hour off to go have dinner and then do a 2.5 hour show. So it was mixing a lot of music. It was 6 hours a day of loud. But it was good. I enjoyed it.
Well, he has got a boundless amount of energy. Kid Rock can put
he
on.
Does.
It's kind of nutty. You have to see it to understand it. It's to his credit, his work ethic is nutty.
He's super talented.
Yeah, that kid puts in. Calling Kid Rock kid is kind of hard for me to do. It's
Bob Ritchie.
Yeah, I know it. I know exactly who it is. But he puts on a hell of a show. Got to give it up to the kid. He brings it, and he likes to entertain, and he cares about the audience, and that's always what I'm looking for.
Man, if you're a fan of Kid Rock, then you are going to get your money's worth when you go to a show.
Yeah, he brings it. I give that to Bob. He definitely does it. Whitney Houston. Now talk about one of the all-time great belters. What a singer. What a talent. You got to mix Whitney Houston in her prime. How is that for you? Describe that type of feeling. I'm getting the goose flesh right now. I swear to God, Pooch, right now, just imagining that moment, when she's really on her game and she's in the pocket. You're doing what you do and the audience is just dying. What a special thing.
It is exactly that. Yeah. It is when she was on, it was hairs on your arms, standing up for an hour and a half. the most. She is so much a better vocalist than anybody else that I've ever worked with. There's not even close. You know, I said Bruce was second, but his second is like way down here.
Right,
you know,
right.
She was super talented, and I kind of caught her on her downward spiral. And so we were canceling shows here and there, but the nights that she was really on was amazing. And I was mixing, there were, God, I can't remember, it was something like 8 or 9 guys in the band, and it was all loud wedges, like no ears,
Right.
loud wedges and side fills. And, it was exciting, and it was, hard. But it was so rewarding when she nailed it.
Yeah, I can only imagine. She was a very special creature. Another one we lost too soon. And, we could go into it. That could be its own show, frankly.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, just the whole thing with how all that kind of went about over that few years during the kind of, and the show was on, and it was rough. Are you still offering your master classes?
Yeah, absolutely. You can go to kenpooch.com for the one that I've recorded. And it's 10 hours of information that basically a guy in Brazil hired me to come down to do a masterclass. I'd been doing master classes around the world. I did a couple in Taiwan, and then Brazil, and then one in Europe. And the guy in Brazil was like, "Hey, can we film it? And then that way I can kind of recoup my costs by selling it online." And it's kind of turned into a thing. It's like he's doing well with it. I think he's getting to the point where he's finally, he paid me for the master class, so I'm not getting anything for the online thing, but it's paying for him to maybe hire me to come back. So I appreciate all you guys out there that have purchased it for sure.
Oh yeah, no, they're lucky to have the access to that type of knowledge, and it's an interesting setup that you got worked out with the guy in Brazil. I know Brad goes off to, like you mentioned, Tokyo and Brazil as well to do these classes, and I'm not sure of how he handles the filming part, but it sounds like you're getting a lot of information out there, good information to people that need it. A question about pyro, how it affects your mix. I know you got a lot of pyro, super pyro heavy, and Maiden, of course. Kiss just, I think, set a world record in Dubai a minute ago. The Gene just, yeah.
Did you see that New Year's show that they just did? It was like
insane. It
was World War II. Man.
Yeah. That was
what is happening?
Yeah, that's see it from space shit right there. And I think the Guinness Book recorded that as the most pyro for any given show. What's your relationship with pyro? How do you feel about it? I know it can be intrusive when it comes to mixing.
I hated it on Kiss, mainly because of the concussion tank.
Yeah.
Was a real pain in the ass, and they set that thing off a lot. And it would blow up equipment. If you weren't, there were a couple times where they would set it off in between like sections or whatever.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And it was so loud that if all of the microphones on stage were open and the PA was on stun, it would blow up some speakers. So there were moments where I'd have to, mute whole groups, and I knew where the concussions were coming, so I'd mute,
right.
whatever, the vocal mics or whatever it was, to help getting blown up. But nowadays, pyro doesn't make as much of a mess, except for the fallout of it on gear after the show, like when they get done and all that smoke and all that crap falls down.
Yeah.
Man, it just chews through. Being a guy that owns his own gear, it chews through faders and all kinds of crap. It's horrible.
Yeah, it can be pretty brutal.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, do you have, say some young buck was coming up to you and saying, Pooch, I love what you do. How do I get into it? What kind of advice would you offer him? Would you push him in this direction?
Absolutely. If you have the passion for this, then absolutely. But the question is something that I don't have an answer to. I've thought about this a lot. Like the traditional path of working for a sound company, building cables, learning how stuff goes together, working at the shop for a year and a half, then getting a gig where maybe you're a monitor engineer or some things, whatever. That traditional path still exists, but kind of not, because there's a lot of young front of house guys that were like the guys that did the record, or I'm seeing a lot of front of house guys that were, with the band when they were driving around in a van, and they're still mixing them when they're huge. So I don't know what the path is anymore. I would say try to put yourself somewhere where you have the ability to watch other people that are good at what they do. So whatever that means, putting yourself working for Sound Image, for example, and watching all of these amazing people that work for Sound Image is a path. Working in a studio and being a fly on the wall and taking notes for the producer, that's a path as well. I don't know. I always say that getting this job is lucky, but you have to put yourself in the right place at the right time. The right place at the right time is a thing. It exists. That's a real thing.
Yes.
But you have to put yourself in the right place at the right time. So it takes someone really wanting this, and I didn't just, I have all these stories of working for these amazing bands, but like when I moved from Boston to LA and started as a runner at studios, I was living on ramen and not making any money.
That's right.
So, I wanted it bad enough that I spent a year and a half of doing that to end up to where I am. So I think you have to want it bad.
Bad backs and good stories. That's largely what we get in this game. But it's definitely something that is it's a passion. You have to be. You're going to be the first one in, last one out. It's so often we mention what we do to folks, and the most common refrain is, "Oh my God, that's so wonderful! You're so lucky." I don't think they understand the dedication, the time, the hours that it takes to.
They don't. Yeah, they don't understand the 16-hour, 18-hour days.
No. So I think the people that are most successful in this business they're tenacious. They're tenacious.
That's right.
and they hopefully are constantly gathering information. As you well know, the technology curve never slightens. It
never stops.
No. It's every 18 months or so you got to relearn the game. And
oh man, I constantly feel like I'm getting my ass kicked by 20-year-olds.
I finally accepted it. I finally accepted that the youngsters came in. Me and you weren't raised up with a laptop in our crib. That was the thing. We were using payphones and rotary dials. I
was 18 when I got like a Trash 80, a Radio Shack computer for the first time. You know what I mean?
Exactly. I try to tell people you got to remember when I was young, I was the remote. So there was no remote for it's a very different time. So let me ask you, you've been doing this for quite some time. I know you keep your ears to the grindstone. You know what's going on. What do you think the future holds for our industry?
I think when we get back to work, it's going to be crazy. Like there's going to be so much opportunity. I think all of us are going to be in situations of if you have multiple clients, they're all going to want to work at the same time. So you're going to have to make decisions, and that's also going to open up other opportunities for other people. So I think when we get there, it's going to be amazing. So I always tell people, keep moving, do whatever it takes. Hang on. I don't know how long this is going to be, but if you can hang on just a while longer, the 5 years after whatever that moment is going to be, say goodbye to your family for 5 years because you're going to be out for 12 months.
I think you're right. We're going to be booked like crazy when everything's greenlit, let alone the artists that have been making music during this whole period, which I think is quite a few from what I know. It's, all the stuff that was scheduled that got, canceled. We had 140 shows, 80 tours, 140 one-offs and 80 tours that all just kind of went away, but they didn't get canceled. They got postponed. And postponing this there's a differentiation there that talks about we will be back and we will be busy. So I'm looking forward.
I try to be positive, right? There's a lot of people that are being negative, but my positive spin on this is it's not like we're never going to go back to work. It's coming. And when it comes, it's going to be ridiculous. So get ready. So I always tell people, hey man, you got time at home right now, try whatever it takes, do some learning stuff, go online and learn from, all kinds of, like this, come to these things and we talk about stuff, but so I don't know. I mean, the reality is, that until the worldwide vaccine kind of has a real big stronghold, and then there's also rapid testing. I think both of those things are required for us to have any sort of large people events. So who knows when that's going to be, but it's coming.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Your lips to God's ears. That's what happens. Listen, my friend, it was great to see you. You look wonderful.
Thanks, man.
Going to keep up with your shows. They're very entertaining and interesting. Send a shout out to Kevin for me. Would love to have him on the show.
Absolutely.
We appreciate you staying up late. And next time I have you on, you're going to tell me how the hell you ended up in Texas. I need to know that story. But
well, that's a long story too. Basically, the short version is the wife. She lived here, and so I moved here.
No, powerful draw women. They can be a powerful draw.
That's right.
Very cool. Listen,
especially
friend,
Texas women.
Oh boy, my gal's got half her family over in Texas, and I absolutely adore her when doing anything she asks. Right up to laying down on a railroad track. So I get it. Yep. I completely get it, my brother. I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me, man. It was a lot of fun.
Absolute treat, my brother. You keep care of yourself, and we'll see you out there on the road.
Cool.
Take care, brother. Good night. So that was wonderful.
Sure was.
I get to talk with the big man himself. I want to mention to the audience that we appreciate them tuning in. We're very lucky to have folks like Ken come on and do the show with us. Next week, we've got Kevin Batty Walsh coming in. He is one of the top guitar tech backline guys. He's of Iron Maiden. His list of credits is so ridiculous. It would take me a half hour to read them. Really, it's impressive. So we're getting Kevin on. It should be a really great show next week, 7 p.m. Thursday. Please tune in for that. I want to do a shout out to our regulars who took time to comment tonight. We really appreciate it. Of course, the one and only true brother, Charlie Zaricki, Tony Lewis, our dear friend, John Del Rio over at Loving Hands, Robert Wilcox, Jorge Arwado, my beautiful and wonderful woman, Jackie Canterbury, Susie Dugan, Bobby St. Laurent. We're going to get him on the show. He's an interesting cat. Angela Williams, all kinds of folks. Thanks for sending your comments in. We'll get to them when we get off the show. We really appreciate you guys. Please look out for us next week. We're going to have an amazing show with Kevin Batty Walsh. And until then, be good to yourselves and each other. Take good care. Good night.